All right, so hello and welcome to our 18th session for LLM courses. The speaker for today's session is Samira Varanasi. Samira graduated with an LLM in tax law from Georgetown in 2017. She is currently working as an international tax manager at KPMG US. Before attending Georgetown, Samira was working with Nishit Desai Associates after completing her undergraduate studies from Nalsa University of Law, Hyderabad. Samira, thank you so much for doing this and taking out time for the session. It's great to have you here. I
Thanks
think you
for
might.
having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Perfect. So, just one housekeeping matter before we proceed. The session is being recorded and it will later be posted on college's website where all of our other recordings are also available. They're divided into bite-sized chapters, which makes them really easy to watch. So, whenever you guys get a chance, please go through it. Samira, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and put up the questions on the screen and we can start the session.
That sounds good.
Perfect. All right, so we'll be looking at a number of topics today, including the university selection process, some components of the application process, and your experience of working at KPMG. So let's start off with university selection first. Samira,
Mhm.
how did you approach this process of shortlisting and selecting universities? And what are some other programs in tax law apart from Georgetown that future applicants can look at?
Sure. So,
Yeah,
as I was actually, so the thing is that I didn't have a very scientific way of going about it. To
yeah,
be honest, I mean, at the time I was working with Nishit Desai, so everybody I knew who was in the tax team and who did an LLM had either done it from um, Harvard, NYU, Georgetown, or Vienna University.
yeah,
Um, and so I actually applied to three universities because Vienna's dates were much later at the time. And, and so I applied to Harvard, NYU, and Georgetown. But other universities that that do that I did not apply to, but I know that are very good for just tax law and tax LLM in general are Northwestern and University of Florida. Um, in at least in the US or and in Europe, you will also have Leiden and University of Amsterdam that are also pretty good and that I would encourage people to apply to. Um, and coming to how I selected, uh, how I shortlisted universities and what went into Georgetown. So, well, Harvard selected me out. I didn't get through to Harvard, so that was it. But for between NYU and Georgetown, so the Georgetown had, I think they had an early bird application, which is what I registered for, and I got the I got the results in like a week after applying in November. So I had like 6 months between when I got a response from Georgetown and I got any response from NYU to actually marinate on Georgetown as an option. And what actually ended up working in favor of Georgetown at the time for me was frankly a combination of both faculty as well as like just the timing of everything. Um, because as much as it's great to be in New York, I think at the time that I was applying for Georgetown, which was going to be 2016, 2017, the Republicans were on the cusp of a major tax reform, as the Democrats are right now.
yeah,
And one of the things that I was really looking forward to was that at the time in DC, there would be lots and lots of conferences that were, that focused on everything. And obviously, finally, the tax reform released in an entirely different form, but there was lots of discussions that were very good. The great thing about a lot of these conferences in the US is that if you are a student at any of these universities, they're free for you. So you can just walk in, you can sit, you can
all right.
listen to everybody speaking, you can network with them, and that works out great. So this is not to say that New York will not have any of those conferences. And in fact, the good thing about both universities is that New York and DC are actually just like not very far away. You can take a bus. I have gone to NYU in the morning by bus, just attended the conference, come back in the evening. It's not very expensive to do that even. And but definitely in both universities, that option is there. Both universities also share a recruitment program, which
Yeah.
I think works in favor of both of them. And the thing is, because you can actually, reach out to people and look for your own and make your own applications. The advantage that going to a university that has a recruitment program really is that when is essentially in timing, because I had actually applied to employers outside, to other employers outside of the recruitment process. But the thing is, there you don't have enough of a negotiating power to start pushing them to respond to you soon enough.
Of course. Yeah.
Whereas the university can kind of put its own weight behind you and say, we want a response in a week. Can you give it to me? So it just moves faster. It's not like it is not possible to do it outside of it. It just moves faster. And as I say this, I should say that Northwestern and University of Florida also have a recruiting program that happens simultaneously with NYU and Georgetown. In fact, it's the same. It happens in the same place. Georgetown hosts all of it, and so that's also called TES. So all four universities will give you similar opportunities, at least when it comes to employment. What will make a difference one way or the other is basically, what is the faculty that is there at the time. Because I mean, so and honestly, it depends. So one of the things, the faculty that I was looking forward to studying with, there was Professor Itai Grinberg, who's now a senior attorney advisor for the US, and he's actually negotiating on behalf of the US at the OECD at the moment. He had this beautiful tax policy course that I really wanted to get into, and that was like a wonderful experience. So I that was something that I really wanted to do, and that is why I even chose Georgetown. At the same time, I think NYU at the time had Lily Batchelder, so who's also, I think, now a senior. I think she's an assistant treasury secretary for tax policy, and so there'll be great people at every place. You just want to know if what you want to do kind of aligns with the kind of work that they're doing. So
Okay.
definitely look for the faculty when you're making a decision on whether you want to go with a particular university, because those are the people you're studying from, and that is the kind of work that you're getting to do while you're there. And that is what because no university is better than the other. You just want to know if it helps your experience.
Of course. So just uh, like leading on to that, it's been 4 years since you graduated. In
Mhm.
hindsight, what were the pros and cons of attending Georgetown?
Well, I feel like I got everything that I wanted out of Georgetown. So I mean, for me, it's mostly pros. The
Okay.
one I would say con, or rather, it was just something that I hadn't actually anticipated until I got there, is ironically, it does not have anything to do with an LLM as such, but I think people don't talk about it often enough just because it's just such a small thing. But your first winter semester, and at least in DC, the way it used to be is that DC has rainy winters, and so the skies are overcast during the day, and it becomes dark at 5. And I
Okay.
didn't actually appreciate what winter blues would feel like. But if you go for days on end without sunlight and you don't make the effort to step out into the sun, it can actually have a toll on your mental health and eventually your productivity, because there's like lots and lots of uncertainty in general already, because you are looking for a job, you're trying to get through all your courses, you're already overwhelmed. So especially if you're going to a cold university, please make sure in the winter semesters you're getting out and getting your sunlight, because it is important that it these are usually 9-month courses. It everything happens really quickly. You want to also make sure that you're taking care of yourself enough to be able to get through all of it.
Absolutely. Can't take that serotonin away. Uh, let's move on now. We've also received a couple of crowdsourced questions. I'll just read these out to you. The first one is LLM in tax law a good choice if I'm good at accounts and I like it?
Yes, definitely. I think that is a great choice if you, especially if you're good at accounts. It's great to do an LLM. Another option that you may have if you are if you're from an accounting background rather than a legal background, is also to do an MST in taxation, which a lot of state schools, and I mean, I'm in the Bay Area, so I know that the San Jose State University offers a program which also has great recruitment programs. It is like similar tax courses, but much more from an accounting standpoint, much more grounded in accounts. There's tremendous opportunities for that as well. If you do come from a more accounting back, and they are obviously less expensive than doing an LLM from especially from private university. I think they may be comparable to University of Florida, which is also a state school. But that is if that is a if that is your background, and cost is also obviously a consideration for a lot of people. Doing an MST in taxation from either SGSU or any other university um, around the US that is reputed would also work out pretty great.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Let's now move to the second crowdsource question on this topic.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on Northwestern versus Georgetown for an LLM in tax law?
I think I touched upon Northwestern before. They do have so I wouldn't say any one university is better than better than the other, although I am obviously partial to Georgetown. Um, Northwestern also has its own recruitment program that happens around the same time. I have coworkers who did come from Northwestern as well, and between both universities, if you're making a decision, again, make a decision based on the opportunities the city offers to you and the opportunities that you get in terms of the faculty that you're learning from. Whichever university at the time has better faculty, go with it, and also make sure that you're looking for the faculty at the time, because what happens is that there is a revolving door, especially in the US, between academia, treasury, and private practice, and your professors are constantly leaving the university and coming back. So you should definitely look at who is which university has a better program in terms of faculty.
Great. So, Samira, I'd now like to talk to you about two aspects of the application process, the personal
Mhm.
statement and the CV. So, let's
Mhm.
start off with the personal statement first. So, can you just tell us how the personal statement should be structured, the kind of facts that should be included in it, and how one should go about demonstrating that they meet the university selection criteria?
Got it. So I think a personal statement, and it's usually like it's a really small number of words that they actually give you to talk about,
Okay.
about yourself. So what you should do though, and I think the mistake a lot of people tend to make is that in their personal statement, they kind of they they write pretty much everything that is already in the CV, right? So your CV is doing the job of telling them this is my experience, and even in a CV, you should like if you have I mean if you're going for a tax specialization LLM, definitely bring out all the things that you've done in tax that is and make sure that that is more important. But a personal statement should not harp too much on your experience because that's already covered in your resume and they're already looking at that. What you should do is like talk about your goals and what you plan to do and how the LLM will actually help you in getting there. So so they already know, and not to say that you should not touch upon your background at all. Do it, but don't spend that much time on it. But basically, if you are saying, hey, I want to eventually do tax policy, then or and your university has all of these courses that help in that, that would be
Yeah.
great. If you want to say you want to get international tax experience specifically in a particular area of tax and the university has great faculty for that, that's also perfect to talk about. So generally focus, just tell the university why it is important, like why it is great for you and for them to have you as a candidate, and without just like repeating what you've already said in your resume. And yeah, that would basically be it. If you have anything that's focused on tax, especially if you're applying for tax LLM, that would be great. But if you have anything interesting that is not even anything to do with tax as such, but which brings up things like leadership qualities or whatever it is, that would also work out pretty great. Because I know people who have applied for IP LLMs, and they have even spoken about how they got into IP because they they were published authors, and then they realized that their copyright wasn't really valued as much and they wanted to do more of that. Things like that work out great. So definitely do write interesting things about yourself that are not already on your resume.
Great. So I think that ties nicely into our next portion, which is the CV and the resume. So based on your experience, what are the kind of internships, activities, and things that applicants can do to build a strong profile, a strong background for an LLM
Mhm.
in tax?
Um, so I would say if you can do a lot of like tax research papers, I'm sure there's lots of, I mean, now there must be a lot of, a lot of opportunities to actually publish specific things in tax law. That definitely helps. What also helps if you is if you have actually worked in tax law in your home country very often. I mean, if you've done a decent amount of tax work, that is definitely helpful. One thing that I did that also I think helped me in building a resume for it was just a teaching assistantship in in the taxation course in Nalsar when I was working. That also gave me um, a lot of at least it actually showed a bent towards tax law. But I would say that in my case, I kind of liked tax law very early in law school itself, and I tended to do a lot more things that were just focused on tax law, and it just happened that eventually that I went for my LLM. So it was uh, it did show. So I would say that if you're doing, I mean, even when I'm saying building, for building your CV, do things that excite you, because it's very possible that tax law is not for everybody, and people don't like it finally when they go for LLM. So um, do as many things as possible in tax law. If it doesn't interest you, then maybe a tax LLM is not a good choice. But if you do find things that are exciting and building towards it, nothing like it.
Great. So let's move on to a crowdsourced question that we've received on this topic. Do I have a shot at Georgetown with a class rank of 45 out of 120 students? I'm interning at top law firms and have been an RA for a tax publication. I think they're
I
talking about
think
the research.
so.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, to be honest, I had, I think, like average GPA throughout, and that does not really. What finally stands out to anybody is your personal statement and what you want to do with like in your LLM and what you have done so far. So they are not really looking at your GPA always. When you're applying for your LLM, you can always offset it with other things that you've done. Like this person has done an RA for a tax publication, that does count. That definitely does count.
Okay, so that kind of takes care of the next question as well, which is the emphasis on grades by Georgetown.
Mhm.
So that answers it. Let's move on. Can you just tell us about the kind of work experience that people should get before applying, and if it makes sense to even consider applying right out of law school? Because we've seen that US law schools in particular are quite insistent when it comes to work experience, unlike schools in Europe and the UK.
Um, and I think that that is a well-founded thing too. Just because, especially if you're doing a special, I mean, if you're doing a general LLM, you can definitely do it from law school, and these are courses you've kind of done before, and that also works out. But when you're doing a specialized LLM, it also requires some level of you having done it before, and you having kind of enjoyed what you're doing, because at the end of the day all of these LLMs are fairly expensive courses that you're doing, and then you don't want to be married to something that you don't like. I would definitely encourage people to get some experience in the space before they are applying to any sort of specialized LLM, whether it's tax, IP, arbitration, or whatever it is. Just do make sure that you've actually done it in real world, as opposed to, because the thing is, what you do in class is is great. But you would also want to know if you are having a career in that space. Do you actually like the work that you're doing in real life? Because once you're like, that many dollars in, and you started your LLM already, and you don't like it, that may actually be much worse for you. So it's not just about what the universities want, what they don't want. In general, if you're doing a specialized LLM, please try and get some experience to make sure you actually really enjoy it.
Great. Thank you for that, Samira. Let's now move to the next section on employment opportunities.
Mhm.
So, in general, what are the kind of job prospects for international students when it comes to the field of tax law?
So there's pretty good employment opportunities in general in tax law, especially after LLMs. And the good thing is that a lot of the LLM that at least the USJD students do is generally for tax law, because that is the preferred specialized, the specialized LLM a lot of people do, and so that means a lot of these universities, especially the ones I named, which is NYU, Georgetown, um, Northwestern, and University of Florida, have like the tax LLM is their flagship course.
Okay.
And so they make sure that there's enough job prospects for that. The one problem that has started to prop up, and this was not as much of an issue when I was graduating, is just in the H-1B, because when I was sitting for recruitment at the time, well, law firms were not sponsoring H-1Bs for entry level people, but Big Fours across the board did, and so that made it a lot easier because there was a lot more opportunities among any of the accounting firms, or any of the or even a company. Like Amazon recruits pretty heavily from Georgetown for its own tax team. But I think increasingly, and it's recovering now, because I know for a fact that EY has started to sponsor H-1Bs again, and it's going back. But there was a period when, just because of the confusion around immigration law under the Trump administration, a lot of people had kind of hesitated to sponsor, because at the end of the day, what does happen is that they have to kind of bet on you, make a $4,000 payment, and then not have the candidate be able to stay for longer than like a couple of months, which is a call that they don't want to take. So one, and that is also why it's important, just to go back to your previous question, also is it is also important to kind of have some amount of previous job experience, because a lot of the US JD students who do the tax LLM are often coming out of coming straight out of law school, or they are people who are actually using the LLM to switch careers. So they may be in litigation and they're using the LLM to get into tax. So a lot of them actually don't have, like on point tax, like tax experience in the past. And that's why a lot of the international students who actually have tax experience stand out and are able to make it the case that not only should you hire me, you should also sponsor my H-1B, because I do have this other experience that I bring with me that is going to help you as I work with you.
Great. So, Samira, apart from visa issues, what are some of the other challenges that international students face while trying to secure employment?
So one thing that I've seen, and especially coming from India, is that uh, 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 we tend to hesitate when it comes to networking, because that's not the culture in which we have been groomed all this while that we were in India. Uh, please don't hesitate to network, don't hesitate to go out, and if you are coming for an LLM, please make attend as many conferences as possible, meet as many people as possible. I know a lot of people get stumped by the idea that, because US students have historically been in sales positions, even when they were younger, they are very good at just small talk, which comes easily to some, does not come easily to others. I personally am not very good at small talk. So what I would do is go attend these conferences, sit through, the what the speakers spoke about, and then go to them specifically, ask them about something that they had spoken about. Because I'm like, even now, a lot of people, like I'm still jealous of a lot of my coworkers who have come from other jurisdictions and have learned American sport and are able to speak about it. I cannot do that. If you can do that, that's a great icebreaker, but that can only take you so far. So what you
Yeah.
can also do is, if you can do it, great. That helps break ice with a lot of people. If you cannot do it, try to talk to them about things that they've just spoken about, and that also works out. But be squeaky, because if you're not somebody, if you hesitate, unfortunately this is a world for the outgoing people. You have to actually go out and then talk to everybody. If you you know just make sure that you're getting out and you're networking with as many people as possible while you are there, even though there's lots of other things going on and it's only 9 months, because that's just 9 months you have. If you want to get a job, that's only 9 months you have to get the job.
That makes sense, yeah. And it does sound like a good conversation starter. Samira, apart from the US, what are some other jurisdictions that people can look at when they're trying to find jobs? And how do they actually approach this process? Because, as I understand, you were talking about Georgetown providing some kind of placement fairs and placement assistance, but I'm not sure if this extends to opportunities beyond the US.
So I know that NYU actually hosts this recruitment fair called ISEP, which is specifically for international students, where a lot of international recruiters come to.
Okay.
And that is something that you would want to definitely be part of, because it's not just because sure, like the tax interview program is very much US employers that come to it. But for ISEP, there's a lot of, in fact, my old firm Nishad Desai Associates used to actually recruit very heavily from ISEP as well. There's lots of other people from a lot of other countries who come for that program, and that obviously provides a great opportunity for you to do it as well. Outside of it, just be on the lookout on LinkedIn. There's each of the universities have their own career portals that not only have that not only have opportunities within the US but also outside the US. Make as many and also look make sure you are actually in touch with people, with your own colleagues, with your own batchmates who are in universities, especially in Europe, etc. Because very often they will like or comment on employment opportunities that are showing up there that you might actually be eligible for. So
Yeah.
the only way is to just expand your base as much as you can. But the one recruitment fair where you can potentially get jobs outside the US is ISIP.
Perfect. All right. So that brings us to the last section of my questions, which is your experience at KPMG. And this kind of ties into one crowdsourced question that we've received. What exactly do tax lawyers have to do? Yeah.
So this is my favorite question. Wait. So the thing is that well, tax lawyers do a lot of things. It depends on the kind of tax lawyers they are. So I will start with international tax, because that's what I do, and I'm an international tax lawyer. We tend to focus a lot more on like taxation of cross-border issues. So for instance, and this would just be that if you're advising a US multinational on how their offshore profits are going to be taxed, and this is something that has become a huge point of conversation even at the OECD, even at the US right now. So essentially, there a lot of our work ends up being focused on taxation of offshore profits, inbound investments. If there is a taxation, what kind of taxation people will suffer if they make an investment in the US, or if a US entity makes an investment outside, whether it's through acquisitions, or it is through just your internal restructuring, or just having your captive subsidiaries. Very often, the way both US and India tax, like way the both US and Indian tax systems work, is that you don't have a territorial system of taxation, and that you are only taxing things in the US. But if you are a US resident, you are getting taxed on your global profits, which is where international tax lawyers come in, and they tell you how to minimize the tax on your global profits. So that's what international tax lawyers do. Very closely, working very closely with us are M&A tax lawyers who focus specifically on like just the taxation at the time of any sort of deal. There's state and local taxation, which is specific to the US, which is basically just because the US is a federal system. There's also there's each state has its own income tax system as well as indirect tax system. So a lot of people do that as well. Then there's estate planning, which is also an amazing and very exciting area of tax law right now, not only in the US but also especially in the UK, Singapore, Hong Kong. This is basically just working very closely with high net worth individuals managing their assets. You need to have a very good understanding of trust law if you're in it. It's an area that's picking up. Even private client is becoming very, very important even in India. And several firms are going into that. And I know that especially from Singapore, Hong Kong, and London, a lot of people keep reaching out, not just to. So what they do value specifically is dual licensing. So if you are licensed elsewhere, that really helps them. But estate planning is definitely an area that has a lot of potential if that is something that you are interested in. And that's also like a subset of what tax lawyers do in general. And I think one more thing that I don't think I'm covering everything, but there's also like taxation of employment benefits and executive compensation, which is just how do ESOPs get taxed, and how does senior level executives compensation essentially get taxed and stuff like that. So there's tax lawyers do very many things depending on the kind of tax lawyers you are talking to. There's lots of opportunities, and there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of nuance in the kind of work that we tend to do.
All right, thank you for that. So just taking a step back to employment opportunities once again.
Mhm.
Can you tell us how the recruitment process at KPMG works, and what are some of the things that applicants can do to kind of improve their chances of securing a job over here?
So KPMG does come for the usual recruitment events, but we also tend to have. In fact, even right now, my team itself has a crunch, and we are looking for people to to recruit. So we keep putting out. You can just see all the opportunities that are there on the website itself, on the careers site. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I would be very happy to refer you if you are a student that is just graduating from an LLM. Usually, I think at minimum for lawyers, they expect either a JD or an LLM. So that's a minimum requirement. That is definitely something that KPMG is looking out for. We used to in the past. I think our business unit, just because our business unit has a significantly higher requirement than a lot of other business units in the past couple of years. We have done our own recruitment outreach and gone back to each of the universities, which kind of just came down because of the pandemic. But definitely, if you see an opening on, just scan the careers page for all the big fours, because everybody has a lot of requirement, especially in like the Western business units, because we have suddenly seen a huge spike in the amount of work that is generally there. So do that. You can also just get recruited through your recruitment fairs.
Okay, so that brings me to the last question, which is the work culture at KPMG. Because you've been on both sides of the table, you've worked in India at Nishit Desai, now you're working at KPMG. How would you describe the work culture at the firm?
So, I have to qualify my answer by saying that KPMG is a very, very big organization, and so no two teams are similar in terms of the work culture they have. It honestly depends on your specific team,
Yeah.
because I have heard from other people in other teams that they necessarily did not share the same ideas about their work culture as me. My
Yeah.
team has only ever been supportive of both my professional ambitions and my personal commitments. Um, Everyone has generally been very and I mean, at least the partner in charge goes out of his way that if we have had several weeks of like really, really heavy work, We are in, like, this week was a week I took the week off because we had worked ourselves pretty heavily for months together, and that a huge part of the team was able to take off just because we knew there was a break, and we know that work is going to pick up again. There's always a constant dialogue about it. People do make sure that you are not burning out,
Yeah.
especially now when we're all working from home, and the whole barrier between work and home has broken down a lot. People are a lot more cognizant of the fact that that is potential. There is potential for that to happen. Nobody really micromanages so long as you are you are reaching out and you're making sure that your deliverables are out on time. Nobody is ever going to question you about how you manage it, whether you wake up early in the morning, finish it off, work late into the night, finish it off. So long as it's done, it's done. There's no specific need to really work in a very specific time as you're working. And so yeah, so I mean I really enjoy working with my team, and and have struck a great groove. One thing I should actually point out to a lot of people who may be joining, hopefully we start going back into work with a hybrid model pretty soon. But what has happened is increasingly a lot of people are working from home, which becomes a little bit of a problem for people who have just joined, because you're not actually meeting your team in its entirety very often. And if you do start your work at a point where we're still in a hybrid model, not as many people are showing up at work all the time, please be please be proactive. People are trying to do their best to accommodate to new joinees and give them a lot of work, but people tend to get caught up. It's not as easy as when everybody is at work together and you can just go up to their desk. But don't hesitate to keep reaching out to people. And I would say this for many teams in KPMG, and actually many teams outside also. Like, it's not from a place of malice or negligence that people are not speaking to you. As far as possible, do reach out to them and ask them if you need work or whatever it is.
All right, thank you. I just have a follow-up, which is on the working hours at the firm, because so far most of the perspectives that we've received are for law firms and
Mhm.
other organizations. So what about KPMG? What are the hours like?
So minimum hours are supposed to be 8, which is like less than law firms. We don't have specific working hours requirements. um, in reality, we have things can get hectic, and you can sometimes feel like you are working pretty um, fairly hard. It is never so the one great thing that I have actually really enjoyed about working at an accounting firm is that the emphasis on the number of hours is not as strong very often. In some and I would say this is something that is true for my team. I know that there are other teams which do still emphasize the number of hours you're putting in. But a lot of the people who have to put in a lot more hours do a lot more work, which is more in the nature of compliance, even in international tax, or who are in M&A and have to close deals and who have to do a specific kind of work. Um, a huge part of what I tend to do is more in the nature of international tax planning, which means that uh, more often than not, you're doing a lot of thinking work, which gets paid for that bit, but it does not mean as many hours, because you're not doing the equivalent of compliance or due diligence where you're spending lots of hours just trying to get done. You're not a cog in the wheel. You are actually doing a large part of planning, and so people are cognizant of the fact that you will not have as many hours, and they're actually then rewarding you on the amount of work that you got done in the few hours that you have. So definitely the emphasis on hours itself is a lot less, and work product is a little more.
All right, thank you for that. So that brings me to the end of my questions. Let's just leave the floor open for a few minutes. If anyone has any questions in the audience, please, you can unmute yourselves. You can put the question in the chat, whatever works for you. And I'm sure Samira will be happy to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, doesn't seem to be anything in the chat. Uh, okay, this. Okay, we
Oh,
have one
that's
question.
fine, Abhi. Oh,
Yeah. How much value virtual internships have in terms of work experience?
I would say in this day and age, I think equal value, I would say, to an in-person internship, so long as you're able to speak to the kind of work that you've done. That is perfectly fine. I would not value it any less than an in-person internship.
There's a follow-up. How much value virtual internships have in terms of work experience? Like from a platform like Forage, not live virtual internship.
Sorry, what firm?
Uh, like from a platform like
Oh,
Forage.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you're doing work, again, like I said before, if that is the if the kind of work that you've done is relevant to um what you're applying for, people will take that into account. Because frankly, at the end of the day, if you are a lot of Indian firms are also unknown, especially if you're talking to US employers. What they are looking for is essentially what kind of work you've done. Very often they will speak up, they pick up a line from your resume and say, speak about it. And if you have been able to speak about it and say that you have done substantial work and not just like, basic research or just gathering a bunch of cases and giving it to them, that does help you out. And it doesn't matter then if you're doing that virtually, if you're doing that in person, whichever way you do it.
Okay, thank you for that, Savira. Let's now move to the next crowdsource question, which is how do I know if I'm really interested in tax law if I'm in first year of my law degree?
You will not know this in your first year of law degree. It is just something that you will build over time. And to be honest, like I don't think I did my taxation course until, if I'm not wrong, the third or the fourth year. And what really so when I did it though, I really enjoyed it, and I tried to do internships in the space. I wrote a research paper in the space as well. You will know whether or not you enjoy it just by the amount of time you want to spend engaging with the different questions that come up. Do try to, if you think, just based on what you have in your class readings, if you do think that that is something that's that at least on the surface level excites you, try to do something deeper in that, whether it's a moot or it's a research paper or a TA ship or something. At some point, you're going to realize one way or the other whether you would want to, like, depending on whether you would want to like go to the end of it, you will know whether or not you actually enjoy that any better than any of the other things that you're doing. So I guess just do as much as you as you possibly can, and it'll give you an answer at one point.
Okay, coming now to the next question that we have in the chat from Sakshi. How many years of work experience would you say is helpful prior to undertaking tax law LLM?
Well, I had 3 years of experience before I started tax law. I mean the tax law LLM, but I don't think there's any specific number of years so much as what they may be looking for is like the substance of your work. I would say 3 years is a decent enough time that you've done enough work, kind of, or actually even 2 years would be enough time that you would have done enough work in the space that you can speak to it when you're applying for your LLM. Because I mean, frankly, but at the time that I was making the applications, I had done only 2 years. It just like in the whole process, by the time I got I started, it would have been 3 years. So if you feel like you have done a decent amount of work and relevant work that you can speak to when you're making your applications, that's good enough time.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Samira. We don't have any other questions in the chat box. Okay, Sakshi is typing. Just give her a minute. There's a follow-up. Would 1 year be
Mhm.
sufficient while applying, given that I feel I have gained quite a bit of experience?
Sure. I mean, 1 year. So if you have gained a certain amount of experience, definitely go ahead and do it, because like I said, there's no hard and fast rule that you have to have had like 2 years or 3 years of experience. So long as you are able to speak to it, like I said, it's fine. You can do it with a little bit of experience as well. I think what is most important, frankly, is being able to know that that is something that you want to invest more of your hours and your money and your that time that you need to get more of an education in. So long as you are comfortable that tax law is the area that you kind of want to stay in, that's fine.
Yeah, and they've just provided some additional information. By way of background, I am interested in estate planning.
Oh, great. There's lots and lots of scope for estate planning in especially, I would say, lots and lots of estate planning, especially in the LA area. A lot of people, a lot of firms do require help with it. If you any other experience that you may have, even with trust law, etc., will definitely count towards it. I don't think it is that much of a problem, really.
Okay, I hope that answers your question, Sakshi. Uh, yeah, I think that's wrapped up. All right, that brings us to the end of the session. Samira, thank you so much for taking your time for this. It was
No
great to,
problem.
and your answers were super detailed and helpful.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Yeah, I think it's quite early in San Francisco. Please have a nice day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye
All
then.
right. Bye bye.